guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and with the patch 1107 somewhat recent release, we are at the tail end stages of the first season of the War Within expansion. And throughout the season of War Within, we've been covering all of the class changes and meta shifts very closely, taking a look at which classes are growing stronger and more powerful as we get additional revamps and talent adjustments, and we've been able to highlight the best and the strongest classes for PvP, Mythic Plus, and endgame content. However, I don't think I've ever taken a close look at what is the most popular class out there. And originally I assumed 80 class is the best right now for the endgame meta, would end up being the most popular choice, but apparently I was proven wrong when it comes to raw population sizes and numbers, which Blizz doesn't necessarily make fully available, but there's a lot of places out there that try to track this information as close to accurate as possible. And throughout my research, I was actually genuinely surprised in terms of which classes have the most numbers of players playing them. So in this video, I wanted to go over my findings and cover the 5 most popular classes that are being played by players right now in the patch 1107. And I also do wonder how this popularity breakdown shapes and changes itself heading into Season 2, which should be available for PTR testing very soon. As always, if you want to see more in-depth videos like these for the War Within expansion, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. Now, the number 5 on the list is actually the class of Shaman, which I'm a little bit surprised by because I do a lot of Mythic Plus and it feels like there's Shamans everywhere. But yeah, this class in terms of overall raw popularity actually ended up on number 5, which is so weird to me because the class is a very strong overall pick when it comes to endgame content. Between their endless utility with the Capacitor Totem, the Poison Cleansing Totem, the knockup ability with Thunderstorm, general tankiness with some of the new tools such as Stone Bulwark Totem, but then there's also so many other totems like how the Wind Rush Totem can actually be used to game break certain mechanics with the Jetstream ability, which I'm surprised they actually haven't fixed at all so far. The ability to cleanse a variety of different abilities, the ability to freedom themselves so they're fairly self-sufficient, as well as the Earth Elemental, which is incredibly good when used right within Mythic Plus dungeons. Even on certain boss fights, it can actually make mechanics much easier. So overall, and on top of it, this is the kit that Shamans bring no matter the spec too. So just bringing the Shaman into Mythic Pluses, it feels like you have a answer to so many different things within the dungeon to deal with, and the class helps out in that regard specifically. Plus the fact that this expansion brought in the raid buff of Sky Fury, I mean, it solidifies the class a spot, not only within raiding content, where Shaman is now mandatory, but to some degree even dungeon content, which considered as with both melee but also caster classes or rather any class that can utilize mastery. And when it comes to considering the actual overall meta, both Restoration and Elemental are very good as well. Even though we primarily see Shamans played as enhancement, it's only played because, as enhanced specifically, because of the damage it puts out. It's literally high-key broken. It's gotta be one of the best melee when it comes to most forms of endgame, but Elemental and Resto are not that far behind. Restoration is a suitable alternative when your group does not have an enhanced Shaman, and Elemental in some cases can actually do within certain situations a little better than enhancement, but overall in either spec or Shaman is a fantastic addition, especially when it comes to endgame push groups like dungeons or raids or even in some cases PvP. The class in general is in a really good spot, so I was very surprised to see that it's actually so far down on the list. Personally, I imagine that they would be very popular since they're so good when it comes to the overall meta of the 1107 and they're very pug friendly. So I thought a lot more players would have picked them up for this expansion specifically, especially when it comes to being able to reroll a character as easy as it is right now. I would think there'd be more players playing Shaman at max level, but actually the class of Shaman is even not the most popular one, even if it's so good as of this moment. I was a little bit surprised at the fact that the Warrior is actually above Shaman in terms of popularity, but when you think about it, it actually makes all the sense in the world. With Warrior taking number 4, they're generally a great class, no matter the expansion. They're very straightforward, and they had a fantastic go at the very beginning within Season 1 of War Within. However, I don't think the classes ever really became S tier or best in slot for any bit of content, but they're a great melee in general that performs on average really well. It's just not literally at the top of every chart though. The raid buff, similar to that of a Shaman, makes them mandatory in raids where they have plenty of opportunity, depending on the encounters, preference to either play as Arms or Fury, but with how many AoE encounters and ad specific fights and where AoE things need to be cleaved down very quickly, it does allow Fury to do pretty well within raid content or just as a tank overall. So if anything, the class will always have a guaranteed spot where you are going to need a warrior, at least when it comes to raids specifically. Fury and Arms both had a really good start at the beginning of Season 1, especially with that Slayer playstyle, which really took off. And I imagine that the class will continue to scale up, as historically it always worked better as they got more gear. As they got towards the tail end of an expansion, warriors got even more stats, better gear, better weapons, and you really saw the class build itself up from where it is usually at the beginning of an expansion, which is fairly low, and then only grow stronger and stronger and stronger from there. As far as we're talking about Fury, Arms, and Prot, they have a decent bit of popularity within PvE and PvP, and like I said, they're not S tier like Enhancement Shamans by any measure, but they're very close up there, and they generally perform really well. Prot Warriors in particular is second best to Prot Paladin and Mythic Plus, which is a very strong option, with Prot Warriors actually probably taking even less damage than Prot Pallies in most cases, where Prot Pallies actually need to rotate the cooldowns and be a little careful. Prot Warriors can take all the damage in the world and their health bar won't even move a glint. As a class, Warrior is also very straightforward, which makes it super easy class to recommend, which I imagine why so many players picked them up. What also helped out Warriors a bunch is it's a very straightforward and no-nonsense class that's very approachable, leading to a higher player count when it comes to players initially picking up the class, but it is also surprising to see just how many are being played at the max level content as well. And imagine because of the Protection Warriors simplicity, it does become one of the most approachable tanks out there, with a simple gameplay of blocking damage, pressing defenses, and being that classic tanking playstyle, with DPS Warriors only focused on building and spending rage, which makes them very easy to manage, whether you want the carpal tunnel pumped gameplay of Fury, or if you want a slow, more methodical based gameplay. It's a lot better for PvP as an Arms Warrior. The number 3 popular class on the list turned out to be Hunter, which isn't all that surprising. It is one of the easiest classes to recommend for brand new players. Like, if somebody hasn't picked up WoW ever, this is literally one of the first classes I recommend to everybody I know, especially with Beast Mastery and how approachable it is, being probably one of the best new player friendly options when it comes to players starting to actually play the class properly, since BM Hunter does have its own quirks and does its own difficulties, but definitely one of the easier classes to start off with for anybody trying to get into WoW for the first time around and trying to jump into endgame content as soon as possible. In raids, however, Beastmaster Hunter has been, when it comes to War Within, a standout option, as you can perform your entire rotation all while on the move, making it the most mobile caster in the game, which is incredibly powerful, especially when there's challenges and mechanics where a ranged character, a ranged player, is required to actually interact with some of those mechanics. And Beastmaster has been a really good standout in this year in particular. Marksmanship is usually a fantastic alternative to Beast Mastery when the situation calls for it. Generally, it's not as mobile as Beast Mastery, but it is often played and takes most of the same roles as Beastmaster Hunter in raids, where its own unique damage profile suits the encounters better. It has a pretty powerful burst capability, especially when you have multiple enemies stacking up together all on top of one another. Survival being my personal favorite, however, is the melee spec out of the bunch, so it doesn't have the same benefits of the range, but it does also make it a lot more unique, especially with some of the most recent reworks, and the fact that this class has been getting so many updates, so many reworks, so many revamps, and even more revamps on the horizon. I mean, the damage of the range specs is looking amazing, but so does the melee, with Survival currently being one of the best choices for pure AoE and cleave content like Mythic Plus dungeons, with an impressive array of abilities that could deal single target damage but also cleave everything around you at the same time, which means that Survival does not have to choose between one profile or the other. They can hit everything all at once. And Survival, I think in particular, has gone through a great number of changes where they've been able to maintain an intuitive yet a very simple rotation at the same time, which also makes them very approachable. Historically, Hunter has been a great class for anybody looking to play the game more casually, which I think is a big portion of the general player base, but the performance at a high-end endgame as well has also helped out the popularity as well, which makes him probably, I'd say, one of the better DPS-centric choices out there right now as of this moment. When it comes to the number 2 on the roster, I was not surprised to see Druid on there. With 4 roles, there's always someone for everybody to play when it comes to endgame, but they want to tank, melee DPS, ranged DPS, or heal. There's just way too much variety with a single class. The class is also very versatile and sees a lot of play but more specialized play within endgame content, where all 4 specs of the druid are actually doing, maybe except for like one of them, but most of them are doing really well here, with Feral being an absolute monster in PvP content, and a very viable choice within raids, and even see some play in Mythic Plus as more players are warming up to their damage profile, which is actually really not that bad. It just hasn't historically been as good as that of a rogue, or classes like Demon Hunter, or some of the other melee options out there, but more players are starting to be a little bit more okay with Feral Druids performing well, and I do wish we see more Ferals gain a lot more popularity going forwards. Balanced Druids are a very suitable alternative to Feral in raids, but they also are very strong as of M+, especially recently, with players pushing some of the highest endgame content, with Boom Kids specifically being the powerhouse they need within those groups to get some of those higher end dungeons finished. Guardian is also a very solid tank, not the best out there. I mean, nothing really beats protection. Paladin in particular, unless we see nerfs out of those guys in the future, but a very solid pick all around. They're more similar to that of Warriors in terms of defense. Like, Warriors are really good at absorbing and taking physical damage. Guardian is also really good there, and they're very close to that of a Warrior, and Protection Warriors are set up right now as the second best to prop Paladin, so Guardian Druid in my head is just not that far behind. The only one that we're not seeing really carve out their own niche is Resto Druid, which hasn't been as strong as it used to be in previous expansions, at least in terms of endgame play, but they're decent enough. You see them here and there a little bit, but they're just not quite securing best in slot spots like the other 3 specs are, and they might scale much better as we get to some of the more endgame gear with the next raid and some of the different tier sets, and with a big druid talent rework coming out very soon that could potentially help out restoration druids specifically. But overall, the class of druid, all as a full package, started off really good in War Within, and it so far has seen a lot of popularity thus far. Overall, the class has just about everything you want out of it, even from a casual gameplay perspective. Instant flight form, which is great for professionals like herb farming and mining. You have stealth and prowl, so getting by certain enemies is a lot easier. You have high general movement speed, which is something a lot of players really enjoy when it comes to classes. Otherwise, you settle on playing something like a death knight or a priest. And great self-healing and defenses, which is something that's usable everywhere. When it comes to the casual content, many players also find druids great for farming old dungeons and old raids, and they're a great long-term enjoyment class with also so many different animal forms for you to collect, so there's a lot of long-term replayability of the same class. You can really do a lot and squeeze a lot out of a druid, and they have great transmogs, fantastic class fantasy, but when it comes to endgame in particular, they have been able to carve out that niche that has helped propel them when it comes to their popularity, which is generally quite high from expansion to expansion. And the class is the #1 pick as of right now in the highest popularity at max endgame with 1107 is the Paladin, which is the most popular overall option, with all 3 specs that are all very competitive. With all the other classes we took a look at, most of the classes that made the list are ones that have some kind of like a mandatory buff or fantastic bit of utility that everybody wants. A class that's high performing when it comes to endgame, but also just a class that can scale upwards as well and can perform at the top end. And I think Paladin is that class that literally has it all. Red Paladins is a strong DPS choice within raids, Mythic Plus, and PvP. Very similar to the Warrior, they're not literally rank 1 and literally the best at everything, but they are very good at all of them. So where some classes are stand out at one thing but weak at others, Red Paladins are even and are really high up there when it comes to everything right now in War Within, which makes them a very good choice. They're also very easy to get into. Some players think that they're very new player friendly, and they're not really that difficult to really get a grasp off of when it comes to the basic rotation, making them very approachable, but also allowing you to get on a Paladin and have an easier time jumping into some of the more competitive content out there. Red Paladins also bring plenty of utility that's valued highly within group content, because well, Paladins bring very similar utility. So this is why Red sees a lot of play, even if it's not best in slot in all forms of endgame. Unlike Prop Paladin, which is actually best in slot, it's literally the best tank right now of Season 1, and everybody's running it for Mythic Plus, and it really does end up helping the class boost its popularity overall. Holy Paladin is also one of those specs that's very unique because it's practically mandatory or nearly mandatory. Technically, all Paladins bring the ability or passive of Devotion Aura to provide a damage reduction for the rest of the group, so you really do want at least one Paladin in your party, but only Holy Paladin can use Aura Mastery to amplify that effect creating a very powerful group-wide, raid-wide defensive that helps dampen a lot of the damage that the party takes, which is incredible. The current healing profile is also incredibly good at solo healing certain targets, like the tanks in most cases, being able to provide them that big bulwark shield from the Lightsmith hero spec is incredibly strong, and it's a massive portion of the overall healing contribution. Plus, they have strong personal defensives and a great utility kit like the rest of the paladins, and it gives Holy Paladin enough uniqueness to make him stand out from other healers, which is a good thing when it comes to overall popularity, especially in some of the more challenging content. So Paladin as a class ends up having it all. It's very casual, player friendly. It's also really good at endgame and brings something that is super unique that no other classes really do. And that overall is what helps them secure a really good and very high popularity right now amongst players that are max level in 1107. They also have some of the best transmons in the game out there, no doubt about it. So when it comes to playing the Paladin more casually, a lot of more players are likely to get into Paladin just on the mods alone and for the class fantasy that the spec itself brings. Which, when you think about it and take all of those things into consideration, it's actually no surprise that Paladin ended up taking literally the rank 1 spot on this list, based on some of the data that I've been able to see while I was researching this video specifically. As always, though, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like. I would very much appreciate that. Also, join our Discord community where we'll be doing more updates for some of the future upcoming PTR builds for the War Within expansion. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in our next one.